So Psalm 82, there's another question. Who are the gods in the assembly? So let's look up Psalm 82 here. Lots of questions.
Man, I'm glad you guys are giving me the easy ones.
Yeah.
Psalm 82.
I'm going to give you a few softball ones later.
We'll see.
Yeah,
Okay,
but I want
82.
to get you really warmed up and kind of show you off here. Because this,
Okay.
when I'm at the gym, he doesn't have his Bible with him. And I'm
Yeah.
asking these questions all the time. So,
Right.
And he gives me the answers.
So God has taken his place in the divine council in the midst of the gods. Yours might say angels. He holds judgment. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to wicked judges? Okay. So the question is, who's this divine
the
council?
gods in the assembly? Yes.
So clearly they're divine beings, but they're not. There's only one God. So often the Hebrew word for gods would be used of someone who was divine, or so an angel could be said of that. And so when you have this council, you could see this as, again, from a Hebrew perspective, that was hammered into their training as kids, right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. Deuteronomy 6. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, right? So that there is one God. His name is Yahweh. That's the one God. So for the psalmist to say, oh, well, there's lots of gods out here, would go totally against what they were taught as kids. And so that's where you have to go, okay, so if he's not talking about Zeus and Apollo and I don't know, Asherah, and he's got all these other little gods, many gods that are there. Who is he talking about? And so there you'd have to go then, okay, so angelic beings for a human, if we saw an angel, we would be tempted to bow down and worship them. And yet they're created beings. And so there's only one who has never been created, right? So God is the one. But all of the angels then, and you have this picture here, and we don't know exactly how it works in heaven. God is all knowing; He's all omnipotent. So it's not like He needs advice He's not going to His angel buddy and going, "Hey, you know what? I'm not sure what to do in this situation. Can you help me out here?" So it's not like that. But it's a lot of times when an author uses language like that, it gives us a picture of something that we can understand and that we can relate to. And so often if we take it too literally and we go, oh, well, there must be a courtroom up in heaven and it looks just like the courtroom I went to downtown, then that's what it is. It's like, well, no, but there's a sense of here's what you can understand as a human, but what's in the heavens is so far above your understanding that you have to have something that you have to have some handholds to get there. So
okay, all right. So Hebrews 12,
okay.
1. Who are the great crowd of witnesses? Since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off the sin that so easily entangles us.
So Hebrews 12 comes after what?
11.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you have your answer.
Okay.
But in chapter 11, you have now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the people of old received their commendation. By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. By faith Abel offered to God. And then you'll have a list of a ton of people who by faith did different things. And so when he gets to 12:1, Paul says, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a crowd of witnesses, he's talking about all of these Old Testament saints that are there, that have already run the race, and now they're cheering us on as we're running the race.
So does that mean, I think I've seen that question many times, does that mean that crowd of witnesses, the Old Testament saints, are they actually watching us? Are we surrounded by them? Or what is that? Because I've seen that as an explanation for it.
Right. Again, I would say it's a way of helping us to understand what we can't understand. Is there a big Colosseum in heaven? And are we on the playing field and everybody is sitting in the Colosseum cheering us on as we live our lives? Maybe. But we don't know.
Right.
We don't know for sure. We just know the language that Paul here uses, as he does often in his letters. He uses the imagery of soldiers going to war, of a farmer who's tending their crops, of an athlete who's competing in the games. All of those are imagery he uses for the Christian life. And so if we think about that and we go, okay, so he's using this imagery of the Christian life, and here's all these folks that have seen the faithfulness of God through the ages, and now they've handed the baton to us, and now we're running the race after them, that they're cheering us on. In a sense, they are.
Okay.
Right? It's a faith that's been passed down. It's not. It didn't start with us. It started with the ones that came before us. Are they literally in heaven with? I don't know.
Right. But it does seem like there's questions when you didn't look at chapter 11.
Right.
You started with verse 12 or chapter 12, verse 1. And if you do that, it does seem to make things appear differently. If you read it through in the context of where it's going, it's like it doesn't bring up an image of a Colosseum of people clapping in the Old Testament saints, go Meyer, and you can do it. So it's more of a nod. Remember these people that have come before you, that you can also do this. Okay.
So you don't parachute in.
Don't parachute in.
Right. Read before and after and try to get a sense of what's going on. So,
okay, here's one. What's the significance of certain numbers in the Bible? The numbers 12 and 40 seem to be used a lot in Jesus' parables. Why?
He likes those numbers.
Okay.
I mean, some folks will say, well, it's, 7, you have 7 days. Or he rested on the seventh day, so 7 is kind of a number of completion. So, people have said that before. You have 40 that shows up. Moses goes up on the mountain 40 days, fast 40 days and 40 nights to receive the law. 40 days, the spies were in the land. 40 years, they're wandering through the wilderness. So you have certain numbers that do come up. 12 tribes of Israel. 12 disciples. I think those have some meaning, but do we know exactly some special significance that we can unlock and somehow make everything make more sense to us? I don't know. I would just say those tend to be things that show up, and when they do, it's a pattern that repeats. But it's not a pattern that's necessarily everywhere at every time. So you have the Trinity, 3 in 1. That's not 12 or 40.
Nope.
So you got different things that you have to be careful, and it's not 7. And you got to be careful of putting way too much significance in those kind of things. It's just one of those things that you notice. And so when you get to the New Jerusalem, you have 12 foundation stones and 12 gates that represent the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 apostles of the Lamb. But the Lamb himself, Jesus, has 7 eyes and 7 horns. So, again, symbolically, as you look at those things, there's probably some significance, but exactly what that is,
not sure. Okay.
I haven't found the verse yet.
Haven't found it yet. Okay. Well, if you do, we'll do it on another episode.
That's right.
Okay. There's one. This is one I've asked you. During the Transfiguration, where did Moses and Elijah come from, and where did they go back to?
Starship Enterprise.
Okay, I'll go with that one. I'm a huge Star Trek fan.
Yeah, so they beam me up, Scotty. So Old Testament saints, when they so as you think about, so Paul talks about this. When we're absent from the body, we're at home with the Lord, right? So when we die, the idea of our spirit being with Jesus at that time is, that's a biblical concept that our body may be in the earth, but our spirit is with Jesus at that time. But ultimately, that's not where it's going to remain, right? Where our hope is a resurrection, a physical resurrection, where our body and spirits are reunited. But in the in-between time, until we get a resurrection body, right? Our spirits then are separate from our bodies. And so Moses and Elijah, as they appear there, would have appeared from glory, where, what if you want to call it heaven, you want to call it Abraham's bosom, whatever you want to call it. They appear from, and they're with Jesus. So they're not in a place of torment. They're not in a place of, whatever. They're in shining garments too. So they're lit up. So they're not angels. You don't become an angel, but they are like divine beings, right? So they have the glory of the heavenly glory or glow that's on them. And so when they show up, they're there for a time, just as angels often appeared in the Old Testament to people, as they did early in Jesus' ministry to announce his coming, and then they go back. And honestly, is that them going somewhere in outer space, or is that them stepping into a different thing?
Realm?
Yeah, that's we don't know, but
okay.
So,
all right. So if we look to Jesus for our salvation after his resurrection,
yes.
What about all the people in the Old Testament that lived before Jesus?
Okay, good
So
question.
how does the salvation work for them? Was there salvation back in the Old Testament?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So salvation, let's see how to say this. Okay, so Jesus' blood is always the basis of which we can be saved, right? So his sacrifice allows us to be saved because our sin had to be atoned for. We're always saved by faith. Faith is always a thing that's required. And the faith is always in God. The content of our faith, though, varies. So for Adam, he's told about one day there would be a head crushing seed of the woman. When Adam believes God in that promise, Adam is saved. Now, Jesus' blood doesn't get shed till way back here, but it's applied to his account because he's looking forward to it. And so each of the Old Testament saints who believed in God, believed in the promises, they were saved by that faith. They were saved by Jesus, but they didn't know who Jesus was yet.
Okay.
They were saved by what they believed God said, the promises that God made. And by believing in God, God saved them. Now, they didn't have the Spirit yet, right? So it was different than after. Then that's why Jesus, when he shows up and as Paul preaches and he talks about the mystery, there's a lot of things that are true for us today that they didn't get to experience because they were pre-Jesus. But once he dies on a cross and once he ascends and the Spirit comes, now we have the Spirit dwelling in us, which they didn't have before.
Okay. So, next question.
Okay.
All right, here's rapid fire here. I'll get you on one of these.
We'll see.
Okay, Matthew 24,
Okay.
34. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Who is this generation when he's speaking to the people?
Let me ask you, who's this generation? What does this mean?
This generation. Well, it could be used as either this generation that's of this present time, or possibly the generation that he's talking about, who he's making reference to. So which one would that be?
So in Matthew 24, right, he's talking about, they're talking about kind of end time stuff, but he's just pronounced a curse on the generation that's going to crucify him. So all right, you got the 24 verse there. Let's look at Matthew 23.
Okay. Because we don't want to parachute in.
That's right.
We just,
So this is where Jesus is talking to the scribes and Pharisees. He has a bunch of woes on them because they've rejected him. And he says, "Therefore I send you wise men and scribes, some of whom you will kill and crucify, some you will flog in your synagogues and persecute from town to town, so that on you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth, from the blood of innocent Abel to the blood of Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation." Who is Jesus talking to?
the generation that he was just talking about.
All right. He's talking to the scribes and the Pharisees. So there's a special curse on the ones who would actually reject and then crucify Jesus. And so within 40 years, or within a generation of this happening, you have Titus who comes in with the Roman legions and wipes out Jerusalem. Man, woman, child, everything. In fact, when they destroyed it, they said that the fire was so hot that it burned the temple and gold flowed in the streets. And so because of the fires that were going on there. When you get to 24, what's the verse?
34.
From the fig tree, so also when you see all these things. So he's talking about the coming of the Son of Man. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. So, yeah, that's a good question. Is he talking about all of those things taking place in the sense of the actual event happening, or is he talking about the certainty of those things happening? And I would say that really it's the destruction of Jerusalem happened in 70 AD.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, these things did happen, right? With this generation, there was a special judgment on them. As you look to a future generation, when he says the coming of the Son of Man, when he comes back, he talks about those things, but then he talks about the sign of the fig tree. And the fig tree bears its fruit and those kind of things. You know this is going to happen. And so there, it sure appears that he may be going back to this idea of the certainty that future judgment is going to happen is the judgment you see on this generation, the generation that crucifies him. When you see Jerusalem destroyed and all those things, then you know that when the great tribulation, right? So he'll say it's greater than any that's come before. When that tribulation comes, it's going to be worse than what happened in his day. How do you know it's going to be that tribulation is going to come? Many times in the prophets, they gave you something that would happen close to a near prophecy that was fulfilled. And when you saw the fulfillment of that prophecy, then you knew that the longer term one was going to be fulfilled. So the fact that this generation, the one that crucified Jesus, suffered the wrath of the Romans would point to the reality that the generation that's there when Jesus comes back is going to suffer a similar thing. Those who've rejected him, they would suffer a similar thing.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to come back next week. And be sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below.